success. They imagine America's great cities, New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, or the bustling metropolises closest to them. After all, nothing says you've made it like looking down from your penthouse. But turn on the news and you'll hear a darker story. American cities painted as hell on earth. The American dream is turning into a living nightmare. The skyline no longer shines, sirens scream through the night, your favorite hangouts are shutting down, and rent is draining your paycheck. It's time to flee to the suburbs. Or is the urban doom story exaggerated? On today's episode of the Infographic Show, we're looking at why American cities are becoming unlivable. When people picture success, they imagine America's great cities, New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, or the bustling metropolises closest to them. After all, nothing says you've made it like looking down from your penthouse. But turn on the news and you'll hear a darker story. American cities painted as hell on earth. They're unaffordable, crime-ridden, and more unlivable by the day. But it's just sensationalism. Or are America's cities really falling apart? Visiting America's biggest cities might be fun, but actually living in them is becoming nearly impossible. In the suburbs, a developer can buy an empty lot and build a condo complex that can house 50 families, all without bothering anyone but a few beavers. But in the cities, they're already packed, built out, and running out of room. And many cities haven't made it any easier. Building housing in cities has become increasingly difficult due to a number of factors. For one thing, many cities have a long history and they like it that way. In many cities, getting a building declared a landmark is surprisingly easy, even if the current owner objects. And that can make it impossible to make any changes to the building structure. Even if a building isn't frozen in time, local residents can object to proposed developments, and it can be a long, slow process to get it approved, leaving many projects in limbo, leading some developers to pack up. And the competition is fiercer than ever. Not only does everyone need a place to live, but cities have been hit hard by one major innovation in the housing and hospitality world in recent years: Airbnb. Short-term rental apps let people turn empty properties into mini hotels. So corporations swooped in, buying units just to rent them out. And that drained the housing supply even further. Cities like New York have since cracked down, banning Airbnb in many units, but rents haven't bounced back. And no matter how you choose to house yourself in the city, you're in for a rough time. If you want a house or an apartment in the big city, good luck. The rates of property ownership in many cities have gotten so high that only the rich can afford it. In New York, the median home price listing was $829,000, which means that you've basically got to be a millionaire to even consider it. Los Angeles is even higher at $951,000. Chicago might seem like a bargain, coming in at $315,000, but it's still out of range for many people. And there's no sign the prices are going down anytime soon. So that leaves renting, if you can afford that. As many people know too well, renting is a trap. You put a large percentage of your paycheck into your housing every month, but you don't actually gain anything long term. You're not paying off your own house, you're paying off your landlord's. That makes it difficult to put money away that you'll want to spend on your own place down the line. And so many renters wind up renting for the long haul. No wonder so many millennials and Gen Z just stayed home with mom and dad. Free rent is fair trade for dad's endless takes on his lousy sports team. But at least renting means no worries about maintenance, right? It's one of the advantages of renting that you don't have to pay for repairs or utilities in many cases, but that doesn't always work out like it should. When there's a problem with a rental in the suburbs, the odds are you're dealing with either a private landlord or a corporate landlord in a recently built building. In the cities, it varies a lot more. Many of those historic buildings have older infrastructure, and the building has likely been sold time and time again. And that means that you could be waiting a long time if something breaks, which can be a major problem if the apartment loses air conditioning during the summer or heat during the winter. And many people find themselves simply priced out. Rent in New York City is over $3,200 for a studio apartment. Los Angeles looks cheaper at $1,700. But the affordable places are miles from the city center. Unless you've got serious savings, you'll need a high-paying job just to get a landlord to consider you. And even then, the market is brutal. Some landlords are rejecting hundreds of applicants and requiring application fees. But they say, don't blame us, blame the system. There are a lot of problems facing the housing industry in major cities. And one of them is the large-scale buy-ups of property by massive housing corporations. Combined with the regulations preventing the building of new housing due to red tape, the few apartments that are still available become even more competitive. Many cities have also instituted rent control for a portion of apartments, keeping the rates low as long as the current tenant or someone they designate as an heir lives there. But that motivates people to hold on to that place as long as possible. And when people can't afford homes, what they become next is kind of inevitable. One of the biggest complaints in American cities today is the homelessness, and no one can agree on a solution. Some blame the housing market and demand more subsidized housing. Others want the police to crack down, and some argue it isn't even a problem. And in some cases, it's not until it is. When experts talk about the homeless problem, they often ask, which homeless? Many are just people who fell on hard times, sleeping in cars or trying to stay unnoticed in parks. They might collect bottles, visit soup kitchens, or beg on street corners, and they rarely pose an issue for the average person. Unless, of course, a city enforces strict anti-vagrancy laws, pushing them out simply because they look unsightly. But in other cases, the homeless can be a public health hazard. Many cities have become actively hostile to the homeless, removing benches and even public restrooms. But the thing is, that doesn't make them disappear. It just makes them more visible. And then there's the small percentage of the homeless who are severely mentally ill and may act out in disturbing ways. Many people have been confronted by an aggressive beggar who wouldn't take no for an answer. And that can be terrifying for those who find themselves on a subway platform next to them. And that might be part of a much bigger problem. Boomers will tell you that they didn't have all these mentally ill homeless people on the streets. They were locked up in the asylums, and it's true. But back then, it didn't take much to get committed. You could be a veteran who had a PTSD-triggered flashback in the middle of the street, or a willful teenage girl whose father was sick of your rebellion. And you could find yourself getting shock therapy. Backlash to the worst abuses led to a push for deinstitutionalization, but many argue it went too far. Today, the most severely mentally ill, often violent homeless individuals are rarely treated until they commit a serious crime that can't be ignored. And if you ask those same people, the justice system has become a revolving door as a whole. Cities are governed by their states, except Washington, D.C., which is its own district. But most still have their own local governments, usually with a mayor and a city council. And many of them have passed laws that are significantly more progressive than the larger state. A lot of these involve crime, with some cities like New York and Chicago choosing to not prosecute certain minor crimes to avoid funneling more people into prison. But what is a minor crime? That depends, and it can plunge a whole city into chaos. In many cities, crime like theft or even a misdemeanor assault aren't fully prosecuted. Instead, they're pushed into plea deals that let offenders walk free, as long as they stay out of trouble. This approach can help young offenders get a second chance, but it also lets career criminals walk out the door and head straight back into crime. Some cities have responded by voting out district attorneys seen as soft on crime, but the problem hasn't gone away. But is crime actually going up? This might be a time where it's actually good to listen to the old folks, because the crime rate today is nowhere near where it was in the late 1980s and 1990s, particularly in New York. The city saw over 2,200 murders in 1989, but in 2024 it only saw 377 murders. This is obviously a meteoric drop, and it's been attributed to everything from removing lead from the drinking water to less violence on kids' cartoons. But while the cities might be less dangerous than ever, it might not always feel that way. Because unlike in 1989, we are seeing almost every crime in living color. If there are 3 words that describe a major US city today, it's often climate of fear. People say they're afraid to go outside, go to dinner, or take the subway, and that fear comes from knowing everything that's happening. It's not unusual for crime victims to jump on social media, sometimes still covered in blood, to share the terrifying story of their attack. Subway riders live stream as the raving man with a broken bottle begs for money and people wait anxiously for the next stop. It can make crime seem a lot more common than it actually is. And a lot of people have taken action and made the city a lot less livable in the process. If you went shopping in the big city these days, you're more likely to feel like you're window shopping even if you're inside the store. Shops have taken to casually locking up most of their goods to prevent shoplifting, which isn't anything new. If you've been to Walmart or Target, they commonly lock up their electronics items and other high-value items. But in many city CVS stores, even toothpaste and detergent are locked up. Shoppers have to hunt down an employee, slowing down your checkout, and the hassle has driven many people away from shopping in the city. And if that doesn't, the price will. People are being priced out of housing in the cities, but they also feel like they're being priced out of everything else. As a meme-worthy political candidate Jimmy McMillan once said, the rent is too damn high.
NATO Burrito, what up, my guy?
Which results in the prices being passed on to the customer. And since it's easy to hop on a bus or a train to the suburbs, plenty of people skip the city's sky-high prices, and that means it eventually closes down and gets replaced with an artisanal acai bowl store or a marijuana dispensary, and even getting a bite to eat can take a bite out of the pocketbook. One of the biggest reasons that people head to the big city is for dining out, but that's been becoming increasingly challenging in a lot of places. The problem is sky-high prices, with every sit-down restaurant feeling more like a splurge. Even fast casual places are breaking the $20 barrier for lunch. That's partly due to skyrocketing rents and partly the lingering fallout of COVID-19, with many restaurants still buried in debt. Add in out-of-control gratuities, restaurants packed with influencers snapping selfies, and the risk of crime or protesters if you dare eat outside. And then suddenly DoorDash feels safer. Just hope your driver doesn't steal your fries. But even one of the biggest advantages of living in the city isn't what it used to be. For decades, cities were job hubs, and millions commuted in from the suburbs, crawling over bridges or cramming into unreliable buses and trains. Moving into the city was supposed to fix that, cutting out the wasted hours. Instead, city residents found themselves stuck in the same gridlock and on the same problematic transit. Because if there's one thing that's a consistent problem in American cities, it's that they're difficult to navigate. Cities are designed to be dense and packed with businesses and residential areas, which means there isn't as much room to build transit corridors. And that means you're more likely to see two-lane highways going each direction rather than a mighty four-lane highway. And in the tight urban grid of New York, even making a turn onto a main avenue can be a tricky affair. It's common for traffic to crawl through Manhattan during rush hour, and Los Angeles is especially infamous for its crushing traffic jams. But don't think you're avoiding it if you take public transportation. The big problem with taking the bus in a big city is that few have dedicated bus lanes, and that means that you're spending time in the same traffic as all the cars. Then there's the subway, which varies dramatically from city to city. While it's less likely to run into delays, the odds are if there's a malfunction in one of the cars, you could be down there for a lot longer than you planned. Additionally, the stations can be unpleasant, overheated places that attract criminals. And while subway shovings are very rare, a fear of a violent crime like that scares people away. And that means services might be getting worse and worse. Many cities have run into has to cut service even more, resulting in longer waits, overcrowding, and services stopping earlier and earlier. It all comes together in a situation that many people would like to avoid, which means it might be time to try out your own 2 feet. Surely one of the biggest advantages of living in the city is that you can traverse it on your own, right? No massive freeways or thick forests to worry about, that's for sure. But while walkable cities may be the goal, it doesn't always work out that way. New York is walkable if you're thinking about Manhattan, but other areas of Brooklyn, Queens, and the Bronx are far more spread out. And cities like Los Angeles or Atlanta are far more designed to be navigated by car. Cars are already expensive, and now New York's congestion pricing will make them costlier still, charging drivers to enter Midtown in the name of reducing traffic. But the biggest problem facing American cities might have very little to do with the cities themselves. Cities are dense, packed with people, heavily developed, and have replaced much of their green spaces with high-rises and urban blocks. That's a recipe for trapping heat, which is why hanging around the city in the summer can be sweltering. There are also many areas of the city that don't have much ventilation, like subway stations, which can crank up the temperature. And while most homes in the city are fully air-conditioned, the stress on the power grid during the summer can raise risks of blackouts. When they hit, they can wipe out power in an entire city if the infrastructure is damaged. And things might only get worse from here. People have been saying that cities in the United States are becoming uninhabitable, and that is mostly hyperbole, but it might not be for long, because many US cities are at risk of becoming dangerous to live in, and the culprit is the climate. With rising risks, just a few shifts could push millions out of city limits. And it's not one threat, but several, with some cities facing multiple apocalyptic scenarios at once, and some have already gotten a taste. One of the biggest risks of climate change is rising water levels. That's resulted in catastrophic flooding in some cities. Most famously, New Orleans saw devastating floods during Hurricane Katrina, which wiped out large portions of the city and resulted in over 1,000 deaths. Although this was at least partially due to flawed levees and a low-lying city plan that left the metropolis especially vulnerable. But coastal cities have also seen a crisis, such as the massive flooding that New York experienced during Hurricane Sandy. Even lesser storms have resulted in major floodings of subways, knocking out transit for days. Los Angeles, San Francisco, and many of the cities in coastal Florida are among the most vulnerable in the case of rising sea levels. Cities won't vanish overnight in a tidal wave, but as the ice caps erode, the sea could slowly swallow breaches and homes, forcing people to retreat further inland. But California is also vulnerable to earthquakes, with many people wondering when the next big one will hit. Earthquakes can also lead to tsunamis, which can speed up that process in a big hurry, often with no time to get away. But for other cities, it's not water that they need to worry about, it's fire. Phoenix, Santa Fe, Scottsdale, and Albuquerque are some of the fastest growing cities in the country, and they are popular retirement spots. But there is one big problem. They're all in the Southwest, one of the hottest spots in the country during the summer. And while the locals will tell you, it's fine, it's a dry heat, that doesn't really matter when the temperature is approaching 120 degrees Fahrenheit, and it can do that a lot. Temperatures have been reaching record highs across the Southwest in the recent years. And it has people asking, how hot is too hot? If temperatures keep rising, the power grid will struggle to keep up. An outage at the height of the summer can be deadly. In recent years, sudden heat waves have hit places like the Pacific Northwest, where most homes don't even have air conditioning. And while cities are built to handle emergencies, they're facing more of them than ever, from extreme heat to wildfires that choke down towns with smoke. Some cities, particularly the biggest, have seen a decrease in population in recent years, but others, particularly those in the Southwest and South, have seen increases. And a big part of this is the infrastructure can't be replaced anywhere else. Much of the country is still sparsely populated, without any public transportation, and with only a fraction of the culture the big cities have. So for those who need to be in the middle of it all, they'll look at the crisis going on in the big city nearest them, and then sign up anyway. But you best believe they'll be complaining all the way. And if America's cities are already struggling, imagine the fallout if the entire system collapsed. Find out what if the US economy crashes, or click on this video instead. California is one of the largest economies on the planet. It's home to 40 million people, a booming tech scene, Hollywood, major ports, and vast farmland. It's a world power in its own right. It even runs on its own power grid.
Oh, that's
away from the US would send shockwaves
seeds.
far beyond its borders, and that possibility may be nearer than you think. On today's episode of the Infographics Show, we're asking what would really happen if California became its own country. Many Californians, from politicians to everyday residents, feel their state's values are drifting away from the rest of the US. The sky over Seattle glows with fire and panic. At precisely 5:04 a.m., 3 high-altitude EMP detonations blind satellites and knock out the West Coast's power grid. Phones go dead, smart cars freeze mid-commute, and then the real nightmare begins. Cruise missiles, dozens of them, tear across Puget Sound, striking airfields, data centers, and power substations. Drone swarms buzz in from the Pacific, jamming radars and seeking out targets with terrifying precision. As the city reels, Russian commandos disguised as dock workers launch coordinated attacks on ports and infrastructure. Behind them, a Chinese amphibious force begins offloading troops and armor straight from retrofitted cargo vessels. Surveillance balloons hover high above, like ominous moons, feeding enemy commanders real-time imagery. It is the unthinkable made real. The homeland has been hit. Day 0, 4:30 a.m. Eastern. It's a normal spring morning when operators at North American Aerospace Defense Command, or NORAD, notice faint blips on the radar screens. High over the Pacific, U.S. infrared satellites detect the telltale heat plumes of multiple missile launches. Within seconds, computers identify them as a wave of incoming cruise missiles and short-range ballistic missiles, likely launched from enemy submarines and disguised cargo vessels positioned in international waters. What no one realizes yet is that this is not just a missile barrage. It is the opening move of a full-scale coordinated Russo-Chinese invasion of Seattle. The goal is a rapid surgical bite and hold campaign to seize a foothold on the U.S. mainland. They want to push the American Navy out of the Pacific long enough to establish maritime dominance, and if they play their cards right, a temporary forward base on U.S. soil. Claxons erupt through NORAD's Cheyenne Mountains Ops Center. This is not a drill. Phone trees and encrypted comms light up. In Washington, D.C., the president is urgently awakened and rushed toward a secure bunker as aides relay the staggering news. Day 0, 4:37 a.m. Eastern. Across the country, just 7 minutes later, Air Force and Air National Guard units spring into action. At least 16 air bases have fighters on strip alert under Operation Noble Eagle, the post-9/11 Homeland Air Defense mission. In Fort Worth, a pair of F-16s soar into the sky before their pilots are even fully awake. From Massachusetts to Hawaii, Ready Alert jets, F-15 Eagles, F-22 Raptors, and FA-18s from Navy stations are airborne within minutes, vectoring toward potential threat vectors. Their immediate task is to intercept enemy aircraft, shoot down inbound missiles, and identify any possible follow-on threats. NORAD and the FAA jointly issue a national ground stop on all civilian flights, 9/11 style, but this time to clear the skies for what may become a prolonged air war over U.S. soil. Day 0, 4:45 a.m. Eastern. The first wave of missiles slams into the U.S. mainland, or are shot down trying. Aegis-equipped destroyers off both coasts engage with SM-3 interceptors. In Florida, a Patriot battery outside MacDill Air Force Base lights up a cruise missile in a fireball over Tampa Bay. But not everything gets stopped. On the West Coast, the assault is brutal and coordinated. Cruise missiles strike early warning radar arrays in Northern California. Joint Base Lewis McChord outside Tacoma, Washington is hit hard, losing airstrip capacity for hours. The port of Seattle is rocked by 3 precision strikes. A massive explosion ruptures the I-5 corridor just south of downtown, sending an overpass crashing onto the freeway. Drone swarms launched from submarines and container ships descend on Seattle's tech district and emergency response centers. In total, roughly 30 enemy missiles hit U.S. soil. The damage is significant. An oil refinery burns, radar systems are temporarily blinded, and communications are strained. But the strategic surprise fails. Key American assets are still standing, and the defense establishment is already adapting. Day 0, 5:30 a.m. Eastern. U.S. Northern Command, U.S. Northcom, based in Colorado Springs, takes the reins. DEFCON levels are raised to DEFCON 1, the highest level of alert, never before reached in U.S. history. Combat air patrols begin orbiting critical locations: Washington, D.C., New York City, NORAD, Silicon Valley, and nuclear missile fields in the Midwest. But now all eyes are on the Pacific Northwest, where the 7th Infantry Division, 1st Corps Headquarters, Air Force units at Joint Base Lewis McChord, and a few Army Special Forces teams are all that stand between the enemy and everything beyond. Backed by assets from nearby naval air stations, it is a thin line of defense, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Reports confirm that the combined Chinese-Russian force has landed at Elliott Bay in Seattle, with amphibious armor rolling off converted cargo vessels under drone and missile cover. Russian Spetsnaz teams in disguise, already pre-positioned, initiate sabotage on bridges and ports. A Chinese carrier task force has pushed into the eastern Pacific, supported by long-range bombers and destroyers fanning southward toward California. The strategy is a classic bite and hold. Seize a key urban center, deny the U.S. access to the Pacific, and use the chaos to push for a negotiated endgame, all before the full weight of American firepower shows up to ruin the plan. Coast Guard cutters and naval littoral combat ships surge toward coastal defense positions. Meanwhile, the 82nd Airborne Division at Fort Bragg and the 101st Airborne at Fort Campbell are placed on 4-hour standby. The president, speaking from a secure location, addresses the nation. Hashtag Attack on America and hashtag World War III trend on social media within minutes. TikTok is filled with footage of F-22s screeching over downtown Seattle and fires raging at the port before the cell towers go down. Day 0, morning. As daylight spreads across the U.S., military intelligence builds a clearer picture. The attack isn't just an act of terror, it's a campaign. A coordinated, multi-domain trans-Pacific operation aimed at toppling American naval superiority and establishing temporary occupation of U.S. soil. Enemy forces are launched from multiple platforms: submarines off the coast of Alaska, converted cargo ships near Hawaii, and mid-range bombers operating from the Kurils and Chinese-claimed islands in the South China Sea. There's even a diversionary attack across the DMZ by tens of thousands of North Koreans. Intelligence reveals that in the days leading up to the strike, the enemy orchestrated a massive series of diversionary exercises in the South China Sea and Arctic. They were all designed to pull U.S. carrier groups away from the mainland. Simultaneously, waves of cyber attacks crippled early warning networks, disrupted satellite feeds, and jammed critical communications. American recon assets were briefly blinded, opening up a narrow window for the assault fleets to approach undetected. Early signs suggest that this new axis of upheaval has bet everything on seizing the Pacific and pushing American forces inland, and fast. Despite the unprecedented nature of the attack, U.S. resilience holds. Continuity of government protocols activate. Secure networks reroute traffic. Critical command infrastructure deep beneath Cheyenne Mountain in Raven Rock remains intact. This will come back to haunt the invaders. Day 0, 12 p.m. Eastern. By the afternoon of the first day, the Pentagon now sees the bigger play. Enemy amphibious forces have seized Seattle, and naval movements suggest follow-on targets could include the California coastline or Alaska. The Navy responds. Second Fleet races to reinforce the Atlantic coast against any secondary assault. On the Pacific front, the 3rd and 7th Fleets combine assets to initiate Operation Backtide, the campaign to eject Chinese and Russian forces from U.S. waters and prevent further landings. F-35s from carriers in San Diego repositioned to forward bases in Oregon. P-8 Poseidon submarine hunting aircraft fan out to sweep for the enemy's submerged assets. B-52s from Barksdale Air Force Base and B-1s from Ellsworth prepare for standoff strikes on suspected amphibious command vessels. On the coast, active duty Army and Marine units rush north to reestablish a perimeter around Seattle. Meanwhile, National Guard units in Washington, Oregon, and Idaho are activated to reinforce and evacuate civilians from projected fire zones. By the end of the first 24 hours, the battle for Seattle is raging. But the United States is not broken. The homeland has taken a hit, but not the kill shot. Day 1. By the end of the first full day of the attack, the United States shifts into an unprecedented defensive posture. The last time America geared up on this scale was after Pearl Harbor in 1941. But even that mobilization was for war overseas. Now Seattle is occupied. The West Coast is bleeding, and the homeland itself is the primary theater. The president invokes the War Powers Act and declares a national emergency. All 50 state governors activate their Army and Air National Guard units. Nearly 325,000 Army National Guard soldiers and almost 105,000 Air National Guard airmen are called up, swelling the ranks of defenders. These citizen soldiers take up defensive positions guarding critical infrastructure, bridges, power plants, communication hubs, and government buildings. In New York City, guardsmen man sandbag nests across key bridges. In Washington, D.C., additional barriers and checkpoints go up around the Capitol and Pentagon. But out west, it's different. The war is right outside. In Portland, troops dig in along the I-5 corridor. In Spokane, air defense batteries sprout around airports. From Eugene to Bellingham, everything is on the line. Seattle, still burning in places, is now a contested urban zone. Joint Base Lewis McChord, battled by missiles on day 0, is under partial enemy control, and American units scramble to hold territory south of Tacoma. Civilian evacuations are ongoing, often under drone fire. The goal for the enemy forces is clear: dig in, disrupt reinforcements, and hold long enough to establish a logistical lifeline across the Pacific. The federal government seizes strategic industries under the Defense Production Act, redirecting fuel to military convoys, converting civilian airliners for troop transport, and shifting factories to round-the-clock munitions and drone production. Civilian air travel remains suspended. Officials are relocated to Cheyenne Mountain, Raven Rock, and other continuity of government sites. Congress meets via encrypted video link, half of its members framed by concrete walls and fluorescent lighting. Domestically, unrest flares near the attack zones. From Sacramento to Salt Lake, sudden waves of refugees test patience and supplies. Curfews are declared in 48 counties along the West Coast. Panic buying empties shelves across the West on a scale not seen since the toilet paper panic of COVID. Day 2. In America, 393 million citizens privately own firearms. Law enforcement quietly coordinates with militias and gun clubs to create local quick reaction forces. The enemy has occupied one U.S. city, but the rest are loaded, locked, and spoiling for a fight. With the initial chaos contained, the military shifts focus to fortifying what's left of its beachheads. The top priority zones are the Pacific Coast, the Alaska-Aleutian Corridor, where Russian long-range patrols are actively probing U.S. defenses, and the southwest border. Intel warns of enemy-aligned paratroopers potentially slipping in through cartel-run smuggling routes. The Olympic Peninsula becomes a militarized zone, with coastal artillery batteries in place to deny naval access to Puget Sound. Navy SEALs and Marine Recon patrol the San Juan Islands, hunting enemy spotters and submersibles that may have dropped off saboteurs. The U.S. Marines string camouflage javelin and tow launchers along cliff faces, overpasses, and boardwalks. Helicopter units fly interdiction patrols up and down Highway 1, watching for infiltrators trying to outflank the main defense lines. It's rugged terrain, but nothing now is outside the realm of possibility. Major West Coast cities issue partial evacuation orders. Seattle is under duress, but now Los Angeles, San Francisco, and even Anchorage prepare for the worst. In the east, the 10th Mountain Division moved south from New York to reinforce the Carolina coast. The 82nd Airborne remains on standby, its paratroopers sleeping next to their jump bags waiting for the call, likely to Seattle, where every hour counts. By the end of day 2, Over 250,000 active duty troops are arrayed around U.S. coasts, supported by hundreds of tanks and armored vehicles in layered defensive belts. Eyes in the sky, AWACS, drones, and satellites knit together the battle picture. There is no surprise left. Now it's war. Day 3. While the battle for Seattle rages in the north, the enemy tests a new front. In the pre-dawn gloom, a second enemy amphibious task force attempts a diversionary landing near Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. The idea is to split U.S. attention, draw forces away from the main theater, and possibly seize a valuable target on the Central Coast. Fast attack craft and modified helicopters skim low over the water, racing toward the airfield. But this time, U.S. forces are ready. Avengers and FIM-92 Stinger teams paint the sky with flaming streaks. Choppers spiral into the ocean. AC-130 gunships, protected on all sides by squadrons of F-35s, shred boats and commandos alike. On the sand dunes below, Army Rangers from the 75th Regiment lay in wait. The fight is brutal, intimate, and short. Dozens of enemy special operators hit the beach and are met by machine guns, mortars, and a wall of steel. The engagement lasts less than 2 hours. The survivors are zip-tied and medevaced out before sunrise. Enemy survivors are interrogated by Chinese-American students recruited from California's best colleges and reveal that Seattle is only the beginning. The plan is to fortify the city, reinforce it from the sea, and establish a long-term liberated zone meant to fracture U.S. logistics and morale. Smaller landings may continue to test the coast, but Seattle is the main effort. U.S. Northern Command reacts accordingly. The 1st Marine Division repositions to the Los Angeles Basin. The 3rd Infantry Division rolls west from Georgia, its tanks placed on rail cars and freighters. Meanwhile, air defenses tighten across the west. Patriot and THAAD systems ring Los Angeles and San Diego. Combat air patrols stack over the Pacific like a giant spiraling corkscrew of steel. Carrier groups, USS Carl Vinson, USS Theodore Roosevelt, and USS Abraham Lincoln, fan out along the Pacific to intercept follow-on waves. 2 additional carriers head toward Hawaii and Guam to cut off enemy reinforcements. Putting aside a recent spate of political squabbles, Canada is the first major ally to join the fight. CF-18s fly combat air patrols out of Vancouver. NATO AWACS aircraft arrive from Europe to boost radar coverage. Japanese destroyers form a joint task force with U.S. ships to push eastward and begin clearing the Central Pacific. Over 500,000 American troops, active duty, guard, and reserve, are now deployed across the U.S., including all 3 Marine divisions and multiple armored divisions. Nearly 1,500 fighter jets dominate American skies, while over 100 Navy warships and 60 submarines form an iron wall around the continent. Missile defenses blanket key regions, and NORAD's integrated network ensures that any new threat is rapidly intercepted. The enemy's surprise has failed. The Seattle beachhead holds, but it is isolated, bleeding and crumbling under pressure. Reinforcements are cut off. Naval superiority is slipping from their grasp. The bite and hold strategy is becoming a death trap. Day 3. Having blunted the initial attack and solidified the defensive lines around the West Coast, America's strategy pivots. It's time to hit back. The Seattle lodgment is holding for now. Enemy forces are isolated behind U.S. lines, hundreds of miles from reliable reinforcement. And out at sea, their plan is unraveling. The home turf advantage pays dividends. American logistics are humming. Railways, highways, and forward-deployed bases are feeding the front line faster than the enemy can react. The Russo-Chinese gamble now faces a brutal truth. Time and mass favor the United States. Drawing from the World War II Pacific playbook, the U.S. doesn't just aim to contain the threat, it aims to erase it and then turn the ocean into a graveyard for any follow-up force. Day 4. At dawn on Day 4, America unleashes hell. B-2 Spirit bombers of the 509th Bomb Wing lift off from Whiteman Air Force Base. Their mission is to decapitate the enemy's floating command structure off the West Coast. The stealth bombers ghost across the Pacific, nearly invisible to radar, before releasing precision JDAMs directly onto 2 Chinese and Russian command and control ships. Simultaneously, B-1B Lancer bombers from Dyess Air Force Base swoop in low and fast from the southern corridor, each carrying a dozen LRASM anti-ship missiles. At a pre-programmed range, they unleash their payloads, sending dozens of autonomous sea-skimming killers racing toward enemy destroyers and troop transports. From beneath the waves, Virginia and Los Angeles-class attack subs, staged near Hawaii and the Channel Islands, fire volleys of Tomahawk cruise missiles. These strike not only naval assets, but also the floating pontoon resupply bases the enemy had begun building. to support their occupation of Seattle. Off the coast, the controversial, underperforming USS Zumwalt has its day in the sun, raining down hypervelocity rounds on enemy ships attempting to sneak reinforcements toward Oregon, obliterating the superstructure of a Russian landing vessel from 1,500 nautical miles away. The enemy is outgunned, outflanked, and increasingly out of options. By midday, the enemy Pacific Fleet is in shambles. Infrared feeds show ship after ship burning, breaking apart or retreating at speed. An enemy aircraft carrier takes multiple hits and lists fatally, becoming a floating wreck. 2 transport ships carrying armor for a planned second landing near Coos Bay are vaporized before they reach landfall. By nightfall, the organized invasion is effectively dead at sea. Day 5. Despite the naval bloodbath, a desperate remnant of the enemy plan pushes forward. In a desperate bid to salvage their crumbling offensive, a reinforced enemy Marine brigade lands at Huntington Beach, just south of Los Angeles. Before dawn, landing craft and low-profile armored hovercraft churn through the surf under covering fire. Explosions rake the boardwalk. Hundreds of enemy troops spill onto the sand, overrunning a beachfront hotel and hoisting their flag over its shattered balcony. Civilians scatter under gunfire as drone footage captures the eerie sight of foreign armor crawling down Pacific Coast Highway. For a few chaotic hours, it looks like the enemy might carve out a second beachhead. But the illusion of success vanishes by midday. The 1st Marine Division, based just 60 miles south, surges into action with the California National Guard at their side. M1A1 Abrams tanks slam into the invaders from the north, while Army Stryker brigades close off escape routes from the east. Apache helicopters hover low, raining down Hellfire missiles as AC-130 gunships orbit above. By nightfall of Day 5, the Huntington incursion is crushed. A few desperate holdouts hole up in parking garages and a Target store, but Marine fire teams sweep them up by morning. Drones broadcast footage of disarmed, zip-tied prisoners slumped on the boardwalk. It's the first time a foreign ground force has flown its flag over a major U.S. city since 1814, and it lasted less than a day. Day 7. With the homeland secured, the gloves come off. The Pentagon finally unleashes the remainder of Operation Backtime, a full-spectrum offensive to destroy the enemy's ability to ever attempt such a campaign again. Ohio-class submarines hidden deep in the Pacific and Atlantic receive their launch orders. From undisclosed locations, they ripple fire over 400 Tomahawk missiles at naval bases, radar arrays, and airfields across the enemy coalition's Pacific launch zones. Military ports in the South China Sea, Siberian Far East, and select bases near Vladivostok vanish beneath plumes of white-hot precision fire. Simultaneously, B-52 Stratofortresses operating from under fire bases in Guam, Diego Garcia, and Barksdale Air Force Base conduct long-range bombing missions. They release not only conventional ordnance but leaflet bombs, rebooted PSYOP classics warning enemy civilians of what their leaders have unleashed and urging them to surrender. U.S. Cyber Command goes on the offensive. Entire enemy grids blink out. Trains stop. Aircrafts are grounded. Communication systems go dark. American-backed insurgent groups within the enemy's borders suddenly come alive with newfound support. Meanwhile, U.S. Special Operations Forces clean up the remaining threat vectors.
What?
Navy SEALs sweep through the San Juan Islands and Olympic Peninsula.
Yeah,
flushing out
and the reflection on my phone, that's right.
In Alaska, Army Special Forces conduct high-altitude insertions to eliminate surviving Spetsnaz teams hiding in mountain outposts. The tide of war has fully turned. The Seattle front has been isolated and rendered unsustainable. Reinforcements are not coming. Ammunition is running dry. Aerial resupply is impossible due to American air dominance. Enemy units begin to surrender in small groups. Others fortify for what they know will be a massive combined arms assault in the days ahead. Behind the scenes, U.S. officials communicate a quiet but unyielding ultimatum to the aggressor nations through neutral intermediaries. Surrender or risk annihilation. The U.S. nuclear arsenal remains untouched but unmistakably ready. Week 2. With the West Coast stabilized, the Seattle invasion contained, the United States pivots into the next phase. Sustained defense, overwhelming industrial mobilization, and the methodical dismantling of any remaining threat. The homeland still bears the scars of invasion. Bombed ports, burned bridges, bullet-pocked storefronts. But now it's about keeping the initiative and grinding the enemy into submission. Seattle remains contested but surrounded. Joint Base Lewis McChord is under U.S. control again, and cleanup operations sweep through Tacoma's industrial zones. But America's defense planners aren't taking any chances. Fortress North America becomes a reality. Thousands of troops reinforce Guam, Hawaii, and Puerto Rico, ensuring no follow-up strike can threaten American logistics again. The Panama Canal, critical for shifting carriers between the oceans, is placed under U.S. military protection with full Panamanian cooperation. Surveillance assets are deployed throughout the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico, watching for any surprise sub-launched attacks or rogue infiltration units. The Rio Pact is activated. Canada, already all in, reinforces Vancouver and Nova Scotia. Mexico deploys elite counter-cartel troops to secure its northern border and cooperate with U.S. units in California, repelling enemy infiltrators. Brazil and Colombia offer basing rights for reconnaissance flights and naval refueling. On the home front, the Space Force begins to prove its worth. Quick-launch surveillance satellites replace those lost in the early ASAT attacks. GPS and comm satellites are hardened and monitored 24/7. DARPA's satellite-hopping prototypes are accelerated. An entirely new layer of resilience now orbits the Earth. Along U.S. coastlines, a mesh of over-the-horizon radar and aerostat blimps stretches from Baja to British Columbia. The Civil Air Patrol and private drone enthusiasts patrol the skies. Local sheriffs coordinate boat owners for low-tech coastal surveillance. America's so-called weekend navy of retirees and fishermen. It's a total defense, total effort. Week 3. Backed by the full authority of the Defense Production Act, America's industrial might kicks into high gear. Detroit retools overnight. F-150s pause. In their place are Strikers, Humvees, and Abrams parts. Boeing shifts its commercial production to stealth drones and strike packages. Lockheed's facilities now run triple shifts, with F-35s rolling out in numbers that would make Cold War planners weep with joy. Shipyards in Virginia, Maine, and Mississippi roar to life. Crews sleep in tents beside dry docks. Every damaged cruiser, destroyer, and littoral combat ship from the Seattle theater is repaired or refitted on the East Coast, still relatively untouched by the enemy. New hulls are laid down in weeks, not months. Even older mothballed ships are reactivated under a modernized Victory Fleet program, equipped with modular missile pods and AI-based threat tracking. The Selective Service is quietly reactivated. Draft notices don't go out broadly yet, but specialists are called.
Brooklyn,
linguists,
New York,
cyber
America.
experts, mechanics. Still, volunteer enlistment skyrockets. Boot camps overflow. Veterans re-enlist. Energy and agriculture stay stable.
My
Thanks
grandma
to the
lives in
geographic
Canada.
luck of an intact homeland. There is no famine or fuel shortage, but Americans willingly shift into war mode. Fuel is rationed, lights dim earlier, Victory Gardens sprout in the suburbs. Meanwhile, the Pentagon's black budget labs go white hot. DARPA rolls out deployable microdrones for urban surveillance. AI-powered threat assessment tools are tested in live scenarios around Seattle. Prototype loitering munitions see field trials outside Tacoma. Small, smart, and deadly accurate. Silicon Valley mostly spared from the early missile strikes.
I know
Shifts
it's the
gears
best.
too.
I know.
Tech bros become digital defense contractors overnight. Logistics AIs are spun up to route supply chains with precision. Coders rewrite battlefield communication systems on the fly. Cybersecurity firms swarm every U.S. network like white blood cells. And the world has seen enough. NATO Article 5 has been fully activated. UK warships join U.S. carrier groups in the Atlantic, chasing down what's left of the enemy's transoceanic support flotilla. German and French fighters rotate through Iceland and Nova Scotia.
Right?
Polish troops redeploy and train alongside Americans in the Indo-Pacific, preparing for expeditionary joint missions. In the Pacific, Australia and Japan become strategic.
Have an appointment at
linchpins.
6 o'clock.
Australian
Driving
F-35s
ladies.
fly long-range patrols over Micronesia. Japanese destroyers team with U.S. 7th Fleet assets to wipe out remaining enemy submarines near the Kurils and Taiwan Strait.
How about you?
Global sanctions obliterate the invaders' economic lifelines. Even formerly neutral nations freeze trade, expel diplomats, and join in coordinated cyber and financial strikes. In the enemy's capital cities, empty store shelves and rolling blackouts cause unrest. The war they thought would break America is now breaking them. Week 4. Back home, life finds its new normal. Schools reopen with armored buses and emergency drills. College students stream into ROTC programs. National holidays now come with speeches and flyovers.
I'm on every day. I try to go live every day. I got 1,060 subscribers.
What matters.
I need 3,000 watch hours though to get monetized.
Intelligence suggests the enemy may attempt a rogue special operations mission or even a retaliatory missile strike out of desperation. Patriots, THAADs, Aegis ashore batteries, and NASA systems ring every major city. Israel shares Iron Dome technology. DC alone has more firepower aimed at the sky than many entire countries. Northern Command initiates mass casualty preparedness drills in every state. Hospitals expand surge capacity. Emergency communication networks are stress tested. And in the Pacific Northwest, Seattle remains a priority. It's still not completely cleared, but fully surrounded, under constant surveillance and undergoing phased liberation one block at a time.
Appreciate you.
The only thing not
told you we were meant to be.
Is the defense posture. That's permanent now. Fortress America has emerged not just as a doctrine, but a reality. End of week 4. A month into the enemy's ill-advised experiment, American forces are still surging outward. Supply lines are humming. Allies are aligning. The war may still have chapters left, but the strategic trajectory is no longer in doubt. Whatever comes next, be it negotiations, collapse, or deeper conflict, the United States now dictates the pace. Its enemies are reeling and retreating. The bite and hold invasion of Seattle was supposed to shock the world.
God works in mysterious ways.
But not how the aggressors imagined. Instead of breaking America's will, it reignited it.
Who knows? Maybe we'll meet up one day.
It unified it. The enemy fleet was shattered. Their elite forces overrun. Their attempt to hold U.S. territory lasted 6 days, and it ended with zip-tied soldiers in the surf. In military parlance, it was a decisive strategic failure. Now go check out USA and NATO versus Russia and China. Who would win 2025 edition? Or click on this video instead. Gunfire cracks through the cold air. The battle many feared and many warned about is now a reality. On the contested plains of Poland, explosions rock the ground as NATO forces push forward, carving through the smoke, fire, and chaos.
Seeds.
Their mission is to stop Russia once and for all. But this isn't just Russia. It's Russia and China, two of the world's most powerful military forces standing together. Who will emerge victorious? Find out on today's episode of The Infographic Show. USA and NATO versus Russia and China. Who would win 2025 edition? Let's start with how we even got here. Well, the world's been on edge for years. So the real wonder is how we didn't get here sooner. From Taiwan to Eastern Europe, from resource struggles in Africa to rising military posturing worldwide. Flashpoints are everywhere.
Not in a war, in a pursuit of love.
New partnerships emerge. The balance of power is shifting and the world is a powder keg waiting for a spark. And that spark comes from none other than Russia. The country has lost over 850,000 troops in Ukraine in roughly 3 years. Its president, Vladimir Putin, is cornered and desperate. He is not only losing soldiers, he is losing the war. He is losing the support of the Kremlin elite that expected him to deliver Kyiv on a silver platter in a few days. Putin is like a wounded animal. But one thing about wounded animals, they tend to lash out, especially when they're not alone. So Putin pushes the red button.
Yeah, I love them spicy too, salty or spicy.
Against NATO bases in Eastern Europe. In just one instance, Russia launched 43 ballistic and cruise missiles and 74 drones overnight, targeting everything from energy grids to military infrastructure. Dozens of Russian missiles are heading toward Poland.
I eat these all day, but they be killing my teeth.
8 multinational battle groups are stationed across 8 countries. And those aren't just symbolic forces. Each one is combat ready, positioned in high-risk zones stretching from the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea. But the most formidable force of all? Poland. There, a US-led battle group reinforced by troops from the United Kingdom and Romania holds the line. This battle group alone is a powerful force of 11,600 troops, ready for whatever comes next. But Poland isn't the only target. Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, NATO's defensive front in the northeast, are all in the firing line. In Estonia, the UK leads a battle group with roughly 900 troops, with France contributing heavy armor and infantry. In Lithuania, Germany commands another battle group, which is reinforced by troops from Belgium, Norway, and the Netherlands, totaling 1,800 personnel. These battle groups provide a formidable defense, but also a massive target for Russia. And then there's Finland, NATO's newest member, a country that shares an 830-mile border with Russia. But Finland isn't just another NATO country, it's a military powerhouse for its size. With a population of 5.5 million, Finland is no military lightweight. Nearly 950,000 citizens, 17% of the country, have military training. Its wartime strength, 280,000 troops, one of the largest in NATO, backed by an additional 870,000 reserves. Per capita, its fighter ratio rivals ancient Sparta. Finland's defense spending has skyrocketed, reaching 2.3% of GDP in 2024, well above NATO's 2% benchmark. Already,
I like all knowledge.
Finland has commanded 150
military, all knowledge.
3,000 personnel in the Arctic Challenge in 2023 and hosted 20,000 troops.
Just a lot of military stuff going on right now. So
for Russia, this isn't just another neighbor. It's a fortress at its border, and it is exactly why Finland is now in Moscow's crosshairs. However, this isn't exactly a surprise. The same goes for missiles now heading toward Poland, Finland, and other NATO countries. Russia has been positioning 9 K-720 Iskander systems in Kaliningrad, Russia's heavily militarized enclave between Poland and Lithuania, since 2016. This allowed Moscow to put much of Eastern Europe well within range.
Oh, thank you.
Iskander short-range ballistic missiles can travel up to 310 miles. Each one is 24 feet long, nearly the size of a shuttle bus, and it weighs up to almost 8,900 pounds at launch.
Once in a while, not all day long.
And 1,500 pounds, capable of carrying high-explosive thermobaric or earth-penetrating payloads. But the Iskanders are not alone. Russia also deploys Kh-47 into Kinzhals, an air-launched ballistic missile with a reported range of up to 1,200 miles. Launched from modified MiG-31 fighters, the Kinzhal carries a 1,000-pound warhead, either conventional or nuclear. It reaches speeds of up to Mach 10, making interception extremely difficult. The missile's high maneuverability and unpredictable flight path add to the challenge. The Kinzhal was first used in combat against Ukraine in 2022, with Russia touting it as a game-changing weapon.
I got one viewer.
Despite its blistering speed, Ukrainian forces using
US
Patriot missile systems successfully intercepted Kinzhals in 2023, proving that even Russia's most advanced
I love you. Thank you for watching. I go live every day, so I'll be live either later, but definitely tomorrow around 11:30. Love you. Be safe. Good night. Have a good day. I should be probably coming back either a little later or tomorrow morning. Subscribe, put the bell, hit the like. Love you guys. Be safe.
Briefly throw NATO into chaos. It's brief, but it's enough.
Good night.